Hi, I'm Kay Spivey, and I'm prepared to get a little confrontational here, so let's go. No, but I thought I would go ahead, and we've been doing a lot of happy poems, been doing the 100 Poems in 100 Days challenge, and I thought maybe I would go into some things I don't like so much about poetry, so feel free to leave comments down below. But here are some things I'm not so into. We're gonna start off slow. One of the things I'm not so into is actually slam poetry. I really like listening to it. I've tried writing it before, and I'm not so good at that. It involves a lot of intricate rhyme and having a presence on stage, which I barely have a presence here in my own room behind a camera, so that's not for me, unfortunately. And when I say intricate rhymes, I feel like slam poetry has a lot of similarities with rap, where you can do it really well and people can hear that you've done it well. You can hear that the rhythm is working, that the rhyme scheme is not cloying at all, that there's a subject being discussed and you're understanding it and you're following and you're feeling passionate about it. That's what both slam poetry and rap do really, really well, and I feel like they are sister genre, that if you're interested in rap, slam poetry is a great way to get into rap, or a great segue into poetry, that they're a good way to understand each other. If you're very into slam poetry, rap is probably a genre for you because they're doing a lot of the same interesting things with language. However, they have the same problem that when they're done poorly, they're really done poorly. That you can hear when the rhyme is too easy, or it's wrong, or it's too close together. Like, it sounds sing-songy and it can come across very dry. It can come across both slam poetry and rap can come across very shock value-y, where all they're trying to do is get the shock out of you and not do any of the interesting work that the genre can do in order to get to that. That they sort of fall back on the fact that they're very good genres for shock value, and they just sort of stick to that. And I don't like that. I think that both rap, maybe all music and all poetry fall into that, but I think it's very obvious in both rap and slam poetry when someone is just doing something for shock value or just doesn't have the ear for it. It's a very musical form, and while I love listening to people who do it well, I can't do it. So there's slam poetry is my first kind of pet peeve, I guess. It's not really a pet peeve, it's one of those genres that I think people get really hyped about, and it's very popular, especially with kind of our media culture right now. It's something that is visual and that you get to participate in, but I think there needs to be more understanding about it. But I think there needs to be more understanding about a lot of poems. I think another one that is a huge pet peeve of mine is haiku done in American style. People, I don't know what they're teaching you in school, but doing the 5-7-5 syllables makes a haiku. And haiku is this is just one of my big pet peeves, so stay with me. Haiku is a very difficult, expressive art form that comes out of Japan. People study for years to do haiku properly. There is a form to it, there is an artistry to it, and how we've translated it over into English, we're trying to do stressed syllables, which isn't the way Japanese works to begin with. So we're trying our best, but there's an element of nature that needs to be in haiku. There's an element of humanity that needs to be in haiku. It's a very complicated form. It's just very short. And so because it's a complicated form, there's nothing wrong with modernizing poetry, but simplifying it and then calling it the same thing as something that is very expressive and very complex irritates me. So sometimes there'll be like stupid little slogans like, what's the one? Haikus are easy, but sometimes they don't make sense. Refrigerator. I hate that poem because the person who wrote it is making fun of the fact that we basically don't teach haiku well. Basically, that's what it comes down to, is haikus are taught as being this very easy thing, kids can do it, 575, easy. And I hate that that is so prominent, that someone wrote that and then can say it's a haiku. It does have the correct 575, and that's it. So it's just a poem that has 575 syllables. It's not a haiku. So that really bothers me. I think teaching haiku as simple is a cop-out, and I think they do it in schools to be like, oh, you learned a form of poetry for kids, because kids can do syllables. But I don't think it's very respectful to a very old form of poetry. I think forms should be taught and respected for what they are. The other thing that has gotten very popular, sort of in the same light as that, in the simplifying a type of writing, is these really short, sort of inspirational quote type poems, where there'll just be a short little phrase or something, very, very tiny poems. And sometimes they're done beautifully. Sometimes I want to have that tattooed on my skin. But I think it's become very popular, and I think it is mostly like micro stories and inspirational quotes and messages rather than poetry. It doesn't do what I feel like poetry is capable of doing. I feel like poetry is an art form where you use language to its highest form, like you utilize things within our language that are interesting, like you can use rhyme, or you can use alliteration, or syllable stressing, or just the way words play together, and you can do something really interesting with it. You can use metaphor, you can use these things that don't necessarily make sense in other forms. And if you're using none of those things, if you're not, I'm not saying like all poems have to have a secret message, or all poems have to be hard, or all poems need a metaphor, but I think poetry can do that in a way that some other genres really cannot. And I think as this sort of uprising of poems that are mostly really nice, lovely quotes, kind of, I don't know if it's poetry, so that's a pet peeve of mine. We'll just leave it there. Okay, and then the last thing that drives me crazy in poetry is prose poetry. I don't like prose poetry, and that being said, I have read really good prose poems. Some people have taken that block of text and just done wonders with it. But is that poetry? This is another one where it's like, I don't want to say poetry has to have line breaks, but line breaks is something poetry can do that prose can't. That's one of the things that defines a poem. Just from a visual perspective, you look at a poem, you know it's a poem. You look at a prose block, you think, man, that's a block of text. I feel like people feel like they can use that form for things that maybe that's not meant for it, because it is a chunk of text. You need to have a chunk of something happening there. Like there has to be a reason that you've chosen specifically to do a prose poem, that you want people to slog through those long lines, and you want to slog through a story, and it still needs to be a poem. It needs to have lines that run through into each other. It needs to have some kind of other thing to it, and it can be done, and I think it is not often done. I don't enjoy prose poems. I tend to shy away from them, which is why when I do read them, it's because they are good, and I've been assured that they're good, and the person was right. But tend to not want to deal with that. I don't know. I just feel like that's something that there can be a laziness to prose poems. It's another one of those genres where some people are using it very, very well and it needed to be a big chunk of text. But there are times when you read it and you're just like, why did you do that? Why didn't you take the time to break it up into the natural pauses, which is something poetry can do? And why did you make the choice not to? And like I said, this is gonna be my controversial video. I don't know if it was that controversial. That's just my opinion on things. I'd love to know what you guys think about those genres. If you know some writers in those particular genres who do very well, love to hear about that. But anyway, those are the styles you're probably not gonna see from me, because when it comes to like slam and haiku, I maybe don't have the mastery for those. I might never be able to write those. When it comes to the little inspirational quote type poems, I love reading them. I would rather be better known for the types of poems that I write than that style. And for prose poems, you might never see me write one of those, because I feel like most poetry can be broken up more. And who knows? I may break all of those rules. But for now, those are my kind of peeves. Let's see if we can get a kitty in here at the end of the video to try and soften all of this up. One sec. Mulan, say you love poetry. Say poetry's the best. Poetry is good for kitties. No, you don't want to be in the video. She doesn't want to be on camera. Okay, you can go. Okay, bye!